Welcome to everyone, and welcome and thank you in advance to our transcriptionist, LB, and we're going to get started now. And CC, thank you. Hello, and welcome to a legacy panel discussion at the Virtual World's Best Practices for 2017. I am Galen Delare, and I will be your moderator for the next hour and, well, not quite 50 minutes, 45 minutes, but I think we'll still have enough time. This year, the Virtual World's Best Practices in Education celebrates 10 years of conference presentations, panels, exhibits, and many, many discussions. Our three panelists today participated in those earliest conferences. Together we'll take a look back at the last decade and talk about where we've been, as well as take a look at how far we've come. We'll talk about challenges, possibilities, how the conference has changed, and about the technologies that have and do make all of this possible. We'll look forward to the future and its potentials for both virtual conferencing and education in general in virtual environments. Now, before we begin, let me take a few moments to explain how we'll proceed during the panel. I will introduce all of our panelists, then ask each of them to respond to questions they've thought about. Then I'll ask our panelists to talk about other thoughts or ideas they have, pose a few other questions to them, and open up the floor for audience questions as well. If you think of a question during the first part of the panel, please hold that question until the second part of the session, so
Sorry,
it doesn't
I'm
get
presenting
lost in
right
the
now.
local chat.
What's up? That's okay. At 12. Okay, what did I do wrong? Oh, good. Hi.
Once I open up the floor, please type or paste your question into local chat so we have it for the chat record. I'll try to catch your question and make sure the panelists know it has been asked. So let's begin. We have with us today three well-known creators, educators, and advocates of education in virtual world environments. I'm going to introduce them according to their Second Life age, because that seemed appropriate for our look back into the virtual beginning of this conference in Second Life. All of our panelists are over 10 years old, which in digital years is, well, old enough to know what it took to survive that long. All three were among the first to begin the Second Life Best Practices in Education and Virtual World's Best Practices in Education tradition. John Lester. John Pathfinder Lester has been working with virtual worlds and online communities since the 1990s, creating online patient support groups at Massachusetts General Hospital for people dealing with neurological disorders, developing online immersive learning environments for students at Harvard, and helping build communities in Second Life that assist people with living with disabilities. He worked at Linden Lab from 2005 to 2010, where he founded Linden Lab's Boston office and led the development of the education and healthcare markets in Second Life. John currently works on multi-user virtual world design and development using Unity, Unreal, and Open Simulator, as well as building custom multi-user VR-based worlds, that's virtual reality-based worlds for education using the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive. He also serves on the board of directors of Virtual Ability, a nonprofit organization that enables people with a wide range of disabilities by providing a supporting environment for them to enter and thrive in online virtual worlds, including Second Life. Kevin Feenan. Kevin Feenan, or Phelan Korimal, is president of Rockcliffe University Consortium, an online not-for-profit organization dedicated to the development of knowledge emergence, organizational design, and leadership and technical studies based on virtual collaborative environments. A graduate of the University of Toronto's EMBA program, Kevin's 28-year IMIT career has included management consulting, project management, business analysis, and software development for both the private and public sectors. Beth Ritter-Guth. Beth Ritter-Guth, or Desi, as she is here, is the Director of Instructional Design and Director of American Honors at Union Community College. Already a tenured English professor before her administrative appointment, Beth's use of innovative technology and virtual worlds in the teaching of literature has been recognized by the Chronicle of Higher Education, USA Today, America Online, and Wired. She received the Nobel Educator of Distinction Award in 2012 and the Faculty of the Future Award from the National Association of Independent Schools in 2010. Beth's most distinguished work was in using Second Life to create 64 literary sims, including Dante's Inferno, Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and Gloria Naylor's Mama Day. Current projects include augmented reality, artificial intelligence, simulations, gaming, gamification, coding, GPS-based technologies, and escape rooms. And now let's begin with our first question. Our first question is, what have been the challenges of hosting or planning a conference entirely in a virtual world? And John, I thought that, well, since you're the oldest, maybe we would start with you today.
I'm the oldest.
You are. You are. You are over 12 years old. Second Life years.
Oh boy. Wow. My bones are creaking. I'll do the speakeasy here. Let's see here. I'll just read out what...
Yeah, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. In my experience, probably the biggest challenge with virtual world-based conferences is really the user experience and user interface. And that is really helping both attendees and speakers be really familiar and competent with the software required to experience the conference and have a successful time. For long-term virtual world or Second Life users, that's not really a problem. They're familiar with the complexity as it exists today in the client. But to be honest, if education communities and virtual worlds want to grow and include more people who are coming into virtual worlds for the first time to attend conferences like this, a lot of improvement and customization on the user experience and user interface side needs to happen. And to be really honest, the core of this responsibility is with the platform developers, in this case with Second Life, with Linden Lab, and not the users of the platform. Platform developers should be providing highly customizable user interfaces for their client software that conference organizers or any group of users or any vertical can modify and fine-tune for their specific use cases. I have done here, but the other thing I wanted to add was, there's a lot of wonderful work done with attachable HUDs and in-world interactive maps and attachable all kinds of things to help you find your way in a conference. What I'm saying is that I really feel that the platform developers need to allow users to easily customize the client itself for these different use cases, so you don't have to ask someone to attach this HUD or find this map or look in your inventory and attach this thing or that. It should be it should be seamless. It should be seamless for the end user.
Okay. Beth, Desi, would you like to let us know your thoughts on this?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when Literature was Alive was created, so I was a professor. I was teaching, but I didn't actually come to Second Life to teach. I came to Second Life because I wanted to do a research project on gender discourse, because back then there was no voice, and so you would come to this world, you would adopt a gender as an avatar, and I wanted to see if people would write in gendered language, and so my avatar, which is based off of Barbie, literally, and has been Barbie for these 10 years, that was what I first came in to do. But once I got here, I thought, oh wow, this is a really, really great place. And I could teach literature here, and I could use this to teach the Canterbury Tales, and I could use it to get students more immersed in things like Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Dante's Inferno, which is often complicated for students. So back then, there were a lot of people doing a lot of really great stuff, right? I hope am I pressing this right? There we go. I'm not sure how far back I went. So, Harvard was here. They had just finished their Law in the Court of Public Opinion simulation, which was amazing. They had avatars. All of us would come, and then their law students would present cases to us, and then we would decide. It was just phenomenal. There was a person here called IntelliGirl who had been doing this huge communications course through Ball State, and she was phenomenal. Oxford was here. There was just so many people, and there was a teen grid back then too, and so people were doing amazing stuff, and things were new. Like Path was saying, like I remember when Voice was in beta, and a bunch of us would go on the beta grid to try it out, and it was so creepy. It was so weird. And now I can't even imagine what we did without it. So, this am I shouting? What am I doing?
Just press it again.
Okay.
There you go.
So lots of people at the time were talking about, we need to get together, we need to share, we need to talk about what we're doing, because people were doing amazing things, but there was no real repository for it. There was the sled list that many of us belong to still, and then there was the Inworld educators group. But really no one wanted to take it on, and it was, more and more people were doing cooler and cooler stuff. We had a lot of great support from Linden Lab, from Philip Rosedale, who was the CEO and creator. And his mother was a teacher, so he was very passionate about education. Hold on, I'm clicking the wrong thing. So I have all these HUDs now. I'm still shouting. There we go. So now we didn't have the amazing tools, and that was probably one of the biggest challenges back in the day, because there was no mesh, there was no voice, there weren't sculpties, so it was all prim, all scripts. There was just, we didn't have the different kinds of lands that are offered now. There weren't, the homesteads and all the different kinds of things. There were islands, and there were prim, and there were scripts. And the conference kind of started because on the sled list, a lot of people had talked about it. And I said, okay, finally, okay, who wants to do it? Let's get together. Who wants to help? And there were 4 of us that got together, and none of us knew each other in real life. We did not work together. I didn't know them. Kevin came on, and he's been around forever. And Rockcliffe really is what kept it alive. I have to say, if it hadn't been for Kevin, we would not be sitting here today, because I was only involved that very first year. But Kevin kind of kept breathing life into it, and Rockcliffe has been, a tremendous force to keeping this together. So the challenges were, it's just like a real life conference. There were a lot of people. We ran the conference for 3 days for 24 hours because we wanted to get every time zone. And it was a lot of work for a lot of people who didn't know each other. And really, Skype was brand new. So there weren't we didn't have the kind of tools that we have today to collaborate. And there were a lot of personal agendas back then. We were all vying for grant money. That's one very real issue. So this was a way for us to legitimize what we were doing, because it was very hard to explain to boards of trustees, please give me $5,000 to buy virtual pixelated land. So we were all trying to figure out ways to legitimize what we were doing. I had very much support from my institution, but that wasn't the case all around. So the challenges were just volume, and it isn't like you can go visit the Hilton and map out the rooms. We relied on donor space, but I have to say Linden Lab was generous, IBM was generous, NMC, who was here then, they were very generous. There were a lot of little companies that were super generous, and universities were very generous. There were a lot of people who wanted to do it. That was a benefit, and a lot of people who were passionate. And then the outcome was tremendous. I mean, that we're still here 10 years later is amazing, and an amazing tribute to Kevin and to all of you who've kept it going. And the partnerships that came out of it. I partnered up with Drexel. I did some work with Harvard. There were a bunch of projects that came out of this first conference, that are, some of the best learning communities I've ever had with, students from, working with other students across the world. It's been a tremendous experience. So I talk too much, so I'm going to stop right there.
That's very, very, very interesting. And Kevin, on that note, as president of Rockcliffe, I'm going to repeat the question here in text, but again, what have been the challenges of hosting and planning a conference entirely in a virtual world? And you have a lot of years now under your belt.
I do, but does this also mean that I'm the baby of the bunch?
No, actually, you're the middle child.
I'm the middle child. Oh, okay.
You are the middle child of this group, yes.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to make up for I guess my little section here I think is going to be a little bit on the shorter side. But the initial challenges were, from my perspective, were really not that substantive. I think it's important to understand that by the time that we had started to do work on VWBPE, that we had already had started to develop a pattern of success in running similar type events, such as our educational classes. Rockcliffe had a lot of open houses that we were doing at the time. We've always been out there supporting music and art events. So by the time we got around to deciding to pick up the reins on VWBPE, we already sort of knew what we were in for, and that was primarily herding cats. And I think there's no other way to describe it. Which is very important.
There were cats. Absolutely.
It is. It is. Or in this case, giraffes. But I mean, I really feel that, notwithstanding the technology and everything else, I really feel that the primary challenge has really been with people management. Right? There's a lot of emotion that people need to be considerate of in any large-scale event. I mean, this could be very stressful. I mean, people are managing their work, their family, they've got their other social commitments that they have. They've got all kinds of other things that are going on in their lives. And then they're doing VWBPE over and above everything else. And, it can be very stressful, but it can also be extremely rewarding. And sometimes we get it right, and sometimes there's a lot of flowers and chocolate involved, so to speak. So I think in terms of the answer to the question, I mean, it just, notwithstanding everything else, no, Joey, not virtual chocolate, real chocolate sometimes. But I really think that, it's really about the people. Right, and that to me I think is the most. It's both the most challenging and the most rewarding component of working with any type of virtual conference.
Very interesting. What a history this conference has. I'm going to move on to our next question, and let me get there. I gave myself room in case I accidentally clicked on something. Okay. How do you feel the conference has evolved over the 10 years? And Kevin, I'm going to go right back to you because you sort of started talking about that a little bit. Do you want to give us your thoughts on that?
Sure. Okay. Well, we've tried to make changes to every conference that we've done over the past 10 years. Well, I guess 9 years for us, 10 years including SLV BPE. The entire nature of the conference, from my perspective, is really to evolve as the technologies that we work with are under constant innovation. I mean, they're constantly changing, new things are coming along all the time. Program elements such as virtual tours, the quadrivium, the above the book sessions, the interactive quests, which we have this year, excuse me, integration of new tools, different things that Linden Lab is coming out with in terms of augmentation of the platform here. These all represent an opportunity for growth. So, for example, next year we're going to introduce even more interactive, augmented, and virtual reality components to the conference. I think some people might have noticed as they've gone around that we have a few augmented reality components to the conference right now. And so, hopefully you'll go around and find some of those things. But, we're also hopefully going to go back to multiple virtual worlds again next year. I think this was a bit of a downer for us for this year, in that the OpenSim community really didn't contribute to the conference this year as they had in the past, and we're sort of still trying to figure out why that is, because we did put out a lot of marketing and other materials, but we just didn't receive any proposals. So, we're hoping to be able to address that for next year. But in terms of evolution, I mean, it's all evolution, everything that we do. Right?
Okay. It is interesting, and it is interesting that it has evolved and expanded outward the way it has. John, what give us some of your thoughts about that, because you've been around, well, for quite a number of years now.
If you keep saying that, I'm going to leave. If you keep saying you've been a John, you're a little dirt.
I told her to put old fart on my tag, but she wouldn't do it.
I know. I should bring my original. Second Life avatar here, he was actually in beta, so his birthday is 2002, so he's 50.
Well, it's hard not to say that, because this is a panel about the history of the conference, so
I know,
the fact that you've been around, but I'll try very hard not to say anything.
I'm giving you a hard time.
I know.
Let me do the speakeasy here. Okay, so at first, the biggest thing I've seen is that well, there's so many things I could touch on, and Feenan, you already talked a lot about the great ways this conference has evolved. But in general, at first, what I noticed was a lot of exploring the art of the possible with the technology, which is fantastic. But it only gets you so far, especially in academia, right? Especially in education. So I think over time, one of the biggest positive changes I've seen is more of a focus on pedagogy and the art of learning, the details of how you create really engaging learning experiences, and examining how exactly the technologies can improve education. Gone are the early days where I rezzed a chair and a desk in World, and now I'm doing virtual education, and it's great to see that enthusiasm, but you need to it's over time, it's been really amazing how quickly all the educators have progressed well beyond that stage. So I see more academic research and educators publishing data about the efficacy of virtual worlds in education, and of course, I would love to see more about that. Also, it's not in my speakeasy. I'm not so good with writing it beforehand, everything I want to say. Apologize. But also, it's wonderful to see how educators are really exploring a multiverse of virtual worlds. I talked to many educators over the years who started in Second Life, who are still using Second Life, but are also exploring other platforms. They're exploring other virtual worlds. They're sometimes even building their own using things like Unity and Unreal. And so I think that's a wonderful thing too. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to just paste the question in here again. And Beth, give us your thoughts on the evolution of the conference, if you would.
Keep pressing the wrong button. So I think I fixed this now. Why is it not working? And I'm clicking on it. It's not doing anything. Okay, so the conference has grown, and I think Path was looking at my notes because I want to really just echo what he said. Conferences are essential and critical for academics. Like, this is how we get our grant money. This is how we get our tenure and promotion. Through publishing. So to have a conference that's not just like a bunch of people like hanging out and saying, wow, that's cool, or like Pat said, like, oh, I rezzed a chair, to actually have data and to have research and to have studies. And Sarah Intelligirl had started that, that culture back when she was here. But over the 10 years, having people present on the research that they've done and on the projects they've done with students. My classes were hands-on, so I didn't do research on learning itself, but really use it as a classroom tool with my students. You know, being able to see what other people were doing and then to make partnerships and to do research projects together to collect data and then disseminate it. And then the conference has been a vehicle for sharing it. And I think as each year has gone by, like the information is better and better because there's more of it. And there's more, we now have a body of knowledge where when we started 10 years ago, there really wasn't anything. Like there was nothing. So when you would go and tell your dean, oh, hey, give me $10,000 so that I can buy virtual land and teach Canterbury Tales, you know, people were looking at you crazy. But now if I take, you know, if I would go, I can show this body of knowledge of these people who are a professional, you know, cohort of academics and say, you know, these are the people who've done research and here's where they've presented it. And this has been a vehicle for that. So I hope that answers the question. I'm sorry my speaking easy doesn't work. I'm like Pat. I'm an off the cuff kind of person, and I apparently wrote my paragraphs too long, and it's choked up over there. So sorry.
That's quite all right. It helps as much as we can. Okay. We're going to move on then to our next question. And question 3 asks, where do you predict education in virtual environments can potentially go with the newer technology that is emerging? And if you've thought about the next part of this, which technologies do you think will have the greatest impact? So this is sort of a two-pronged question. And Beth, I'm going to step back to you and let you address this one.
Press the right
Or
button.
should I say Desi? Sorry.
Desi, it's okay. I think on my gravestone they're going to have to put Beth/Desi.
Oh yeah, mine is
so
that way too. Mine is that way too.
You know, and it's funny because I don't look like Barbie. If you've ever met me, I probably am like the anti-Barbie. So people are like, "Oh my gosh, you don't look anything like your avatar." No kidding. So I am passionate about emerging technologies in the teaching of literature and the digital humanities, and also in other courses because in my administrative role I oversee all courses. And I think the technology is really, virtual reality is, you know, certainly with, you know, the generation of the Oculus, Google Cardboard, things like that, like the work that Beth is doing with, you know, different virtual reality systems and Unity and just gaming, you know, using games and not just like, you know, not just, you know, there are educational games that are horrible. And then there's Fallout 3. And I can play Fallout 3 with my students as it is a textbook and it tells a story, like a choose your own adventure story. So, you know, there's different ways that we can look at technology. And I would argue that those, you know, Fallout 3, Mass Effect 3, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, those are all textbooks. Those are all novels. They're all 1984. And so if we can look at technology differently, and we can embrace the technology in the humanities, which is the slowest of the academic subjects to come to technology, you know, we can do so much with the technology that exists. The challenge, I think, is having enough people to develop. Because as you know, colleges have less and less money, students have less and less money. It's really hard to produce those environments. You know, it's hard if you don't know how to program for Unity, which is why Second Life has always been my favorite tool because it is pretty easy. I mean, there is a learning curve, obviously, but it's a lot easier to build things here in Second Life than it is to build in Unity or to program. You know, to program something into Unreal. So I think the technologies are better and better, but there are fewer people who know how to do it. And so that's why it's so critical for like the work that Pathfinder's doing on making that technology more accessible to people. And I think it's the reason that Second Life has stayed around so long for educators is because we can do it, whereas we can't do other, you know, platforms and programs. I've never been on OpenSim. I only ever used Second Life, and then I actually left my tenured position to be a missionary where I couldn't use Second Life at all. So I actually stepped away for 2 years, and I've been back for 2 years, but only in a social capacity. My position now doesn't really lend for teaching, and students have tablets, and Second Life doesn't run on tablets well. Um, we've always been conscious of the technology and the machines that run the technology and the graphics cards and things like that, and that is going to continue to be an issue as well.
Yeah, we do have, there's an app, Lumaya is the app, and that seems to work pretty well on some mobile devices. So it is coming along, yes.
It is coming along, but I think Pat said this earlier, maybe it doesn't happen fast enough. And I don't know if Pat would agree with that, but I don't think it happens fast enough. Lumia is great, or however you say it. How did you say it? What that I use that.
Lumaya,
so
Lumaya.
Lumaya. I do use that, and it is the best of it. So yeah.
John, let's go to you next, and you can maybe respond to that and speak to the question.
Sure. Let's see. Well, I think there's a lot of potential in virtual worlds, obviously, in education in virtual worlds, to branch out, to leverage many different platforms, including the opportunity for educators to build themselves the platforms they need. To clarify that, I don't mean necessarily the educators themselves working in Unity and Unreal, but perhaps getting together and working with there are lots of classes in different universities on Unreal and Unity. They're standard programs that are part of game development curricula. So I think there are lots of opportunities for educators to work with people who know Unity and Unreal to build their own specific based on their needs, build their own virtual worlds. I think there's a lot of support, there. And I think what you've seen over time is that these platforms, and Unreal and Unity are really like Coke and Pepsi, right? They're vying for the same market essentially. Although Unreal will say they're going for a higher end market, and Unity is saying they're going for a broader market, mobile, console, and desktop, and VR, and everything. But they're really in a very similar space. But they've evolved and are continuing to evolve into very democratizing technologies that can be used by non-professionals. By that I mean they're targeting indie game developers. They're targeting the programmer in their house, in their garage, trying to build a next killer game, right? So the technologies are becoming simpler. I'm not saying they're as easy as Second Life, absolutely not. But they are becoming less and less of you need to, have worked in game development for 8 years to understand how to use them. You can have people, if in your own universities, I would suggest look in the game development course curricula, and you'll see classes for learning Unreal and learning Unity. Unity is probably the more popular of the two. If I had to pick one, Unity is Coke, Unreal is Pepsi, right? In my opinion. But there are lots of people who, within a year of working on Unity, can really do amazing things with it. And also, I really think open source technologies like Open Simulator are gaining a lot more traction among educators who want to create highly customizable worlds without being tied into any commercial relationship with a company, without any licensing issues. And so I think, just to name specifics, Unity, Unreal, and Open Simulator, I think will have a great deal of impact in the future for platforms. And yes, everyone is bananas about virtual reality these days, and even taking into account the overhyped nature of it, I do think there are really great use cases for virtual reality in education, but only very specific ones that need to be chosen and developed for very carefully. Good VR development is such a nascent science and art. There are very few best practices that are well established for VR even now.
Yeah, because it's so
So,
new.
yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, it's been around since the 90s, but the current crop of hardware is new, and you have a lot of devil in the details. So
Mm-hmm.
I think social VR platforms, especially ones that are very customizable, like I encourage you to check out VR Chat. It's really interesting. It uses Unity. You can use Unity to build your own rooms in VR Chat and upload them. Right? So it's the model of you build in Unity and then you upload it into the world, and everyone can jump into your multi-user world in VR. And VR Chat actually has you don't need, I should have put this in the text, you don't need a head-mounted display to use VR Chat. You could use it in desktop mode. So it supports both desktop mode and goggles, right?
Nice.
Really cool.
Yeah.
They have a lot of potential, and VR Chat, I mentioned it specifically because it's been around for a couple years. It's actually out there on Steam. You can get it now. It's free. And Sansar looks like it has a lot of potential in this area, but it's still not here yet. You know, time will tell to see how well that works. But I just think we have to be very, very careful, not just educators, just everyone, to not treat VR like a shiny new hammer, which causes people to usually fall into the trap of, I have a shiny new hammer, so everything in the world is a nail.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the trick is really to really find the perfect VR use cases in education, and then develop those solutions to those use cases, carefully matching the tech with the user's goal. And it's no simple task. It takes a lot of work, similar to all of the work that all of you have been doing to identify what is the really ideal use case for a platform like Second Life in education. I'm saying with VR, it's the same problem, except it's 10 times harder. It really is, because when you I should have written this out too, but when you fail to match the tech with the goals in VR, it's an epic fail. And I mean
visually?
Like, visually, experientially, because you have another level of immersiveness. You really feel like you're in this environment, and it really feels horrible. You can't escape it until you rip the goggles off your head, right? If you have a lot of lag in SL, it's like, well, I'm just going to turn my head and get out of here and deal with something else. Or, oh, this room in Second Life isn't built so well, I'm just going to teleport out of here or run my avatar out of here. In VR, the immersiveness is a double-edged sword, because when it's good, it feels incredible. When it's bad, it feels like the worst thing you can imagine. And I mean that.
Wow.
So the stakes are much higher to get it right in VR. And I'm not saying it's not achievable. I'm just saying it's no simple task. And in education, I think moving forward, it's going to take a lot of experience and learning best practices, not just VR best practices, but VR in education best practices. The last thing I want to say about this is it's interesting that one of the most popular games for VR is something called Job Simulator, and the whole if you just look for it on Steam, Job Simulator, and the whole premise of Job Simulator is it is a success because the game is designed around the fundamental fact that manipulating objects in VR is still clumsy. So it's a game designed for the fundamental flaw of VR, which is you can't finally manipulate objects in 3D. So Job Simulator, you basically play this game where you're working in a restaurant and you're picking up eggs and they're flying out of your hands. It's a clumsy simulator, really. It's like I'm a clumsy person in a office and I can't staple these papers, and it's hilarious and it's fun because part of the gameplay is it should be clumsy. But just think for a moment, the most successful game is one that's designed around one of the real big flaws in VR. So I think it's brilliant. But it speaks to the fact that if you try to build a game around very fine control of objects in 3D in VR, you're going to fail. because the tech is not there yet. And
Okay.
so I think
Okay.
that was it for me.
Yep. Okay, Kevin, I'm going to repost the question here so that you can have it and give us your thoughts on this.
Okay, well, I guess I've got a slightly different take on the question. So, and it's kind of interesting because all three of us here have various different perspectives on what this actually means. From my perspective, there are two components that I feel virtual environments are really apt to be positioned in order to fulfill as we go forward. The first is something that I call just-in-time knowledge emergence. And this is essentially a pet project of mine. It's part of what I'm basing Rockcliffe on, right? Which is a theory of knowledge development wherein learning can take place through experiential apprenticeship type exchanges based on both current information and critical thinking and synthesis. From my perspective, it's simply just not enough to have access to big data, and there needs to be a context to the substance of information that represents what I've been calling a justified applied belief. Knowledge itself also needs to be self-perpetuating, right? The rationalization of experience isn't enough. It has to be both lived and it has to be shared. So virtual environments to me are in a far better position to do that than a brick and mortar classroom. They won't fully replace a virtual real life environment, but they will allow for far more effective use of those particular environments when it comes time to applying skills that can be developed in a virtual environment. So, I mean, to give you a case in point, there was a wonderful simulation that was done years ago with regards to Canadian Border Services, and they had developed an entire simulation for their border patrol inside Second Life. And what they found was that test scores went up 30-40% compared to not having the virtual simulation in place. And these are the types of things that I think where virtual environments can really shine. Right. The second one is with regards to this idea of task switching or multitasking, as you know, a lot of people like to call it,
which we all love to do.
We all do, right? But I mean, there's many things that people don't do well, right? And task switching is one of them, right? Part of the problem is that we're managing a cacophony of stimuli. So project managing the interaction between the dozen different things all happening around us, you know, that becomes very problematic, right? Sometimes we get ourselves into trouble taking on too many interests that all have concurrent deadlines. Where I can see virtual environments helping is to sort out these particular types of issues, where you can be virtually in multiple places at the same time, but where you only have to be mentally present for the events that require your critical thinking skills. Right? So, you know, for everything else, there is so much unproductive time that could be better spent elsewhere. If you think of all the, you know, for anybody that's involved in, you know, information type work, right? But I mean, if you think of all the business meetings that you've been to, where it's just been a 60 to 90-minute waste of your life, right? I mean, we've all been in those particular types of meetings, right? Where, you know, simply, you know, the boss wants to see a warm seat, a warm ass in the chair, so to speak, as if you're really paying attention rather than trying to, you know, sort out your shopping list or check your email or do whatever else. So, you know, there's, if you can be virtually at particular engagements, right, but only have to pay attention to the ones that really require your attention at that particular time, I think virtual environments have a huge potential to allow us to be far more productive in those particular situations.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting. We have one more question for each of you, I believe. And our fourth question is this. How did your experience with this conference in the early years color your future projects? And Desi/Beth, I would like to start with you on this one as well. You would give us your thoughts on this.
Oh my. Having participated, having used Second Life to teach almost cost me tenure. I almost didn't get tenure because the only people on my tenure committee who wouldn't vote for me were the other English faculty because they thought that this technology was ridiculous. It was anti-academy. But fortunately, they weren't the only people on the committee, so I did get tenure.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of risks 10 years ago as an educator in here, working a junior faculty member working in with this technology. Then when I became a senior faculty member, I tried to always provide an environment for junior faculty to be creative because it is an issue, especially in research institutions, but but also at community colleges too, where teaching is the focus. So it really working in this environment really helped me to understand what the needs are, sort of across the board for people who want to use emerging technologies in whatever their discipline is. There are some disciplines that lend themselves very well to technology advancements, nursing, for example. Literature, not so much, right? So, and I could take them to the Globe Theater at Renaissance Island a million times, but they still couldn't see the value in it, right? Being part of this conference and having the SLED list and having the educators group Inworld provides us a community of practitioners, just like the American Medical Association or just like the, the Modern Language Association. And it gives us a place to talk about the realities of being a first adopter or somebody who's trying something new. And it also gives us resources like, I'm not an expert in VR. I love using it. I love using goggles. I want to figure out how to use it more. But I can come together in this group with someone like Beth who knows a lot about it, or come to Feenan who's done a lot of research on learning itself and get statistics and research from his great wealth of knowledge. So this conference and that it's perpetuated all these years means that there is still a continued body of people who want to get together, who want to share, and who want to learn from one another. And that's tremendous. It was tremendous 10 years ago, but it's even more powerful knowing that 10 years of sharing has occurred. I hope I answered the question. My speakeasy totally crapped out on me. Sorry about that.
Well, that sounded very interesting to me. Very interesting. And the idea of the dangers of using this technology, and I think someone mentioned the humanities. I think it was you that the humanities seem to be generally slow in using it. I can attest to that, absolutely. It took me a long time to even say anything about virtual worlds for history because it was such...
I still don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Even talking about it today, like telling people what I was doing today, they're like, really? You did what? And I'm like,
what is that? Right.
I built Dante's Inferno. Like, well, the students built it because this the way that Literature Lives work is they built it. I'm like, we compared, Mom and Day, and we had this huge sim, and the students built the content, and they just blink at you. So I feel like I'm with you are my people because you understand. If I come to you and say, oh, what would be the best script to use? Like, that doesn't sound like a foreign language to you.
Right.
But in the academy, in the world of the English people, and the classical literature, which is what I taught, British and American literature as well, it's like a foreign, alien, unacceptable, inappropriate language. Like I'm cursing and, swearing at them. It was really, really tough when I was junior faculty.
Yeah. And Kevin, you've been now president of Rockcliffe University through all of this, and let's just have you respond to this and get your thoughts on it.
To the question or to Desi's experience?
To the question. I'm sorry. Let me repost the question.
No,
Or
no,
both.
that's
either or both.
Well, actually, let me just tack on to Desi's experience before I get into my answer here, because we've had, with the number of educators we've worked with over the last 10 years, 12 years actually. I mean, since I originally started it, we've had a number of educators that have actually been fired from their positions because they've had an avatar inside Second Life. I mean, that's the reality of the situation 10 years ago, right? It was, I guess, sort of either a love it or a hate it type thing. And I know two people that were actually fired for their positions once their faculties found out that they had a Second Life avatar and they were doing any type of teaching inside this particular environment. And I know another one that went from a university that was very engaged in Second Life. They applied to a different position somewhere else, and after they got there, they were then also let go because the person hadn't disclosed on their CV that they were doing all this stuff in virtual worlds and what have you. And so, it's very interesting to see the change in attitude over the last 10 years with regards to a lot of this stuff. But anyway, let me come back to the actual question here. So, and actually, I had the other question prepared, so I'm going to have to do this the long way here. So, so long as my computer decides to play nice with me here. So, to be honest, VWBPE is one of the primary reasons why a number of projects at Rockcliffe get delayed each year. There's a lot of things that we know need to be done at Rockcliffe, but VWBPE is really our pride and joy. It's one of our biggest successes, and I think it's something that we look forward to every single year. Many of the things that we learn at Rockcliffe between VWBPE conferences go into the next conference, and vice versa. I mean, it's very difficult not to take away a learning experience for this. I don't think that you can really come away from VWBPE without having your ideas of the future colored in some way, shape, or form. The lectures, the workshops, the exhibits, they always provide new and different ideas on things that you can do. The quadrivium, especially, since we've introduced that, is great for sharing information on the latest research into innovation trends over the past year. That particular aspect of our program has been working out substantially well since we've introduced it. Of course, the keynotes are always fresh. They're always on top of the latest trends, what's going on, and the networking opportunities to people. I mean, you can't ask for a better group of people than the people that come and attend this particular conference. I mean, you really can't. They're it's like having a great big family around without all the drama. Well, sometimes with the drama, right? But I mean, families are families, right? So, but I really think that if you come away from VWBPE learning nothing, it's really only because you weren't paying attention, right? So I think you have to, by default, this conference colors your perspective for future activities. Absolutely.
I would agree. Okay. Great. Okay, we have come to the end of the first.
Oh, I didn't get to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Now
sure.
I have forgotten you.
You gotta let the old man speak.
Now I have forgotten you. I apologize. For some reason in my mind, I had asked. I was at you. Okay. So, John, let me repeat the question here, and
Well, let me before I put my because actually this was the question I thought about the most and wrote the most
Okay.
in Speakeasy. But before I turn on the Speakeasy, one thing I wanted to mention, I'll paste this into text chat here, because I'm talking about different future platforms. I wanted to mention this this platform Space. I forgot to mention it because I haven't used it very much at all. I've only been in there a few times, but I want to learn more about it. But the founders of OpenSim developed this online environment using, again, it's one of those environments where you use Unity to build the environment, and then I can deploy it on the web. But Space is really interesting. There are actually a lot of educational projects already happening in there, and I'm going to be learning a lot more about it, so I'll be able to speak more competently about it. But it's another platform to take a look at, and it's especially interesting not just because it's based on standards like Unity, but also, again, it's the folks who developed the original OpenSim technology. So so that's pretty cool.
Yep.
It's very cool. It's always good to see 1,000 flowers bloom around this, around virtual worlds with many different types of environments. The other thing I wanted to come back to really quick, when why weren't there probably a lot of educator submissions around OpenSim in particular, and it's probably, I'll paste this into chat too, it's probably because this conference is an open simulator focused conference that's it started in 2013, so the fourth one was in December. And it's a general conference around Open Simulator that happens in Open Simulator, but if you go there and you look at the content, there are a lot of educational projects happening. You'll see it definitely skews more towards, wow, these are a lot of these presentations are around education. And I think a lot of educators are looking to OpenSim, especially if they want to build their own private worlds. And they don't want them to be public. They want to have a lot of control over their virtual world environments. And I think probably one of the factors why there wasn't a lot of engagement with the educator community using OpenSim for this conference this year is probably because there's a lot of focus on it happening already in this other conference that was just a few months ago. And people only have so much time and so forth. Educators usually have to pick one, right? It's like, well, which one am I going to present at and work on being at? So I think that could be a factor. I think it would be really interesting to have some kind of alignment or relationship between VWBPE and the folks organizing the Open Simulator Community Conference, which I think is, again, have more flowers bloom, and I think have some cross-pollination would be really interesting between those two conferences in the future. But getting back to, and actually I presented at the last Open Simulator Community Conference, so you'll see a link to my talk there, which involved an educator, actually, who also does education work in Second Life, Karina Girvan. So anyway, so again, a lot of people are in multiple worlds, but they only have so much time, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, do I prep for this conference or that conference, and so forth. But
and
getting back to
teach?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's a challenge for educators and anyone trying to attend multiple conferences, and prepare for them. But for the question, how did your experience with this conference color your future projects? For me, the big takeaway was that seeing VWBPE, when I remember it being SLBPE, start in the early years and grow, it really drove home for me the importance of community and people in virtual worlds. And I always get a kick when people talk about the SLED mailing list. I think that's the thing I'm probably the most proud of, having been at Linden Lab, was starting that damn thing.
I've used it.
So the archives go back to 2005, which is the year I started, and I love to see the people coming together on SLED, even to this day. It's still active mailing. It just continues to a lot of mailing lists change and grow and die over time, but SLED has hung in there as a really great community repository, using a very simple least common denominator communication medium like, email. I mean, if I were to redo it today, I would probably think about building it in Slack, which I love, but at the same time, everyone always has email, and there are always email archives. So I think that's part of the beauty of SLED, is just its simplicity. But the early years really drove home for me. Watching VWPE grow is just, it's all about the people in these virtual environments, and to see, it was always continually an inspiring experience just to see the educators and the students, and also the volunteers, coming together to start the conference and grow it over a decade. And I am completely astounded by the social network that has evolved and is strong to this day from the beginning of these conferences. People who have met at these conferences continue to meet in other online conferences and have become colleagues and collaborators in the physical world and on multiple projects, not just in Second Life. So I'm astounded by the robustness of the social network that has grown up around this conference, because conferences are critical. It's things that the conference is something that happens at a specific time in a specific place, and in our increasingly time-shifted and place-shifted society, which is fracturing us into, oh, I have all these people and I just talk to them through comments on Facebook whenever. Conferences are critical because they focus time and attention, and that's how you build strong social connections, through focused interactions, not through, I saw you comment on my YouTube video and now we're best friends and I'll know you in 5 years. So anyway, that's I really don't have adequate words to explain how special this, in particular, this community has grown, or express adequately the long ripple effects on educators around the world that I see every day. I still, the connections are there permanently and continue to stay strong. It's really inspiring. So to come all the way back full circle, how does this colored my future projects, colored my, my future work in virtual worlds? It hasn't so much colored anything as opposed to giving me the ability to see and appreciate a broader spectrum of colors involving educators and collaboration in virtual worlds. It has given me a new appreciation for how rich the color spectrum can be in terms of the strength of connections between people growing out of this conference. So that's, if that makes any sense. So that's,
it does.
I stick a fork in me. I'm done now.
Okay. Before I open up the floor to questions from the audience, and I'm sure that there are many, do any of you have any other thoughts you would just like for the audience to know about the work you've done, or thoughts about something that you wanted to say perhaps and didn't get a chance to, or just anything, or about the conference, or about the metaverse, the multiverse, education in general, virtual worlds? Any other thoughts you'd just like for all of us to know? And while you're thinking about that, if our audience members have questions, I invite you to start posting them into the local chat, and I will try to collect them and make sure that as many of them as possible get answered today.
While we're waiting, I just got to say that this is the most beautiful build. It's just fantastic. I was just wandering around here for
It is really nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just
really neat.
I mean, all down to the little details. Like I was hanging out with sort of seagulls on the rocks over there, as they're flying and floating in the air currents. And it's such a wonderful. I guess the thing I'm trying to say is it's such a wonderful combination of man-made structures and nature.
Have you seen the lighthouse with the foghorn? Have you sounded the foghorn?
No.
You have to go do that. It's lots of fun.
Okay, cool. I got to do that. I've been underwater already, but the magic. There's a magic sweet spot where it's a combination of nature and human-made objects, and I think this place is just a perfect. It's just an amazing build. I wish. See, this is when I wish, like I wish Linden Lab had the ability to save entire regions just as like an OpenSim as OR files. So you just zip up this whole thing and just, you guys could
Yeah, that would be
you could give
something.
it away or sell it or whatever. I mean, people would love to be able to deploy this in Second Life, deploy it in OpenSim, export it to Unity or something like that to deploy it in space. Or you got a magic
Okay,
place here.
it is. And we have a question. It looks like this question is from Beth Ghost Raven. How do you think avatar personalization and appearance affect student learning in virtual worlds? And I'm just going to open this up to any of our panel members, and I'm going to repost it here so you can look at it again.
So my students have seen me in real life and know that I'm not Barbie. I'm the anti-Barbie. It's actually really interesting because my students never cared, because I explained to them why she looks like Barbie, and I was doing research, blah blah blah. But what I've presented, and I'll never forget, and I can't remember his name, the head of NMC. He met me and he's like, "Wow, you don't look anything like your avatar." I'm like, really? Like, why would I create my? I mean, it was just Larry. Yeah, it was just really funny. I mean, the students, the very first thing that I do with them when I bring them is we work on their avatars. I have little kits that I give them, and I show them all the possibilities so that they can be whomever they want to be. If they want to be a giraffe or if they want to be a gorilla, and the other thing is I give them a little bit of money, and so that they have a little, like 100 linden, just so that they have, and we talk about identity and what they want to do, and is it a psychological, do I secretly want to be Barbie? I do not. But why haven't I changed my avatar for 10 years? Because this is the avatar I came with, and it's the history of who Desi is in here. So it's really presented a lot of great conversations, and it's a good way to learn about the world because you learn about opening things and resing things and things like that. But as far as their interaction with me, it is exactly the same as if I had never used SL. Like, they don't treat me any differently. I don't know if that's different for Kevin or for Path.
Interesting. Last year we had an entire quadrivium on identity and avatars and appearance and identifying with your avatar. It was fascinating, a fascinating discussion.
I think one of the things that we've observed over the last 10 years is that avatar appearance does in fact have a lot to do with helping people get into a comfort zone in terms of working with the virtual environment. So, for example, Letty, who's over at the side here, I mean, she's brought in several classes from the University of Texas into this particular environment. And inevitably, one of the very first things that the students want to do as soon as they get in here is to change their avatar. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get the stock avatar that comes in here, and it's not, I don't think it's necessarily a matter of people changing who they are as an individual based on their appearance, although certainly, it's people do react to you differently if you're, a human versus a giraffe versus a, spiky ninja warrior. Is that what you called the other avatar, Path? I don't know. I don't know how to describe it properly.
Which avatar? My original Pathfinder avatar?
Yeah, your original, the
here's
spiky
my original.
World of Warcraft
original.
ninja. Yeah.
No, this is the original. This is 2005. Just starting.
Oh, how fun! Oh, wow.
This is the first one. This is the one that I wore most of the time when I was at Linden Lab. Was a more modern version of this one, but this is the bare bones 2005 one I started with. But yeah, people. Well, let's see how to answer the.
But people do react. People do react to you differently, though, depending upon what costume, so to speak, or what avatar you've got on. Right? I've got a little champagne puppy, right, that I have as part of my inventory, and people react to that far differently than they do when I show up as Feenan, my avatar here. By the same token, I mean, a lot of tinies will attest to this, right, and I'm quite sure a lot of women will attest to this, that if you're in here as a tiny, you get reacted to differently than if you're in here as a human, right, and even gender, right, people react to you differently. right? And for some reason, it's you get more problems sometimes, even being here as a female, right? Than if you come into this environment as a male, right? So, yeah, I think appearance does have a fair bit to do with it, but by the time you actually get beneath the facade, I mean, it's still the same person underneath for the most part.
Yeah. There are people underneath the avatars. There's a person behind every avatar all over, and that I think that myself, I think that's just fascinating. I think that's the wonderful part of it. We have another question. This is from Dennis.
Oh, I wanted to say something more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay.
I apologize if anyone who's never seen this avatar before is kind of freaked out by it, because it is a little freaky, kind of mysterious looking. But it's interesting. What I've found is that different people perceive the whole avatar thing differently, in my experience. Some people have a very strong affinity for a very specific look for themselves, and other people, it's really kind of two camps that I've noticed, and I'm in the second camp. I tend to be more of my avatar will be contextually relevant and reflect my emotional state at that point in time, right? So I mean, one of the things when I came into when I was exploring around here, I was my giraffe. I've been really just liking the little giraffe because I just love how the way it looks and the way I feel when I look at it is very evocative to how I don't know, been feeling lately. I don't know how to explain it, but sort of a sense of wonder, childlike kind of sense of wonder at things and wandering around here. It felt right wearing it. As soon as I started going underwater, as soon as I got underwater here, I put this avatar on because I thought I need to be, I need to be underwater and I need to be a sea creature. He actually flaps. I'm getting really close and personal to you there. Feeling sorry about that. He looks better in the water, but I'm just going to back up here. But and the other thing too is like I was underwater and I saw people floating around underwater, so I started going up to them and I started doing this. Here you go, Feenan, have some bubbles. I started blowing bubbles at them. So for me, it's very much a contextually relevant thing in a current emotional state, and some people that it's totally different, and some people are. Some people empathize very much with their avatar, and some people don't as well. It's really amazing to me the range of how people perceive their avatar and how it affects the way they see the world. And of course, people treat you differently based on how you look. When I look like this, people treat me very differently than when I look like a giraffe or a human. And it's interesting because I very rarely use human avatars. Except actually in OpenSim, I kind of use the same basic human avatar all the time, and I'm not sure why. But there's also if you haven't read it, you paste it in here. This is a book to Nikki Yee's research on the Proteus paradox. It's a lot about identity and avatars, not just in Second Life, but just in general in games and any multi-user virtual world where your identity is malleable. I mean, I think it can be summed up to some people change avatars the same way people change facial expressions or change clothes, and other people change avatars very, very rarely. And I think it's just a spectrum of different ways of perceiving yourself and perceiving other people, because we're all different.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll go back to the giraffe now. This is too big.
Okay. Okay. I'd like to move on to the next question, if that's okay. Someone has something else to say. Okay. This is from Dennis, and he says, I think Second Life is a great medium to meet people, but it seems that through today's talk, it is still not readily accepted as a way for professors to teach their students in a virtual classroom. And that's the question, and then he adds, change is needed. And so you've started to respond to that a little bit in the other questions, and if any of you would like to add some thoughts to that question.
I think that it is true. I don't think it's exclusive to Second Life or to virtual worlds. I think we're at a crossroads in higher education, where there are a lot of people who are doing things the way they've always done them, lecture from the stage, whatever. And then there are now a large group of us who don't do it that way, who are focused on student-centered learning, who are focused on emerging technologies to help aid student-centered learning. And it really, it was worse 10 years ago. As Feenan said too before, it was worse 10 years ago. People were getting fired all of the time. People don't get hired necessarily if they have a strong technological background, especially in the humanities. They might not be offered a position, but it isn't because it's not accepted. It is because it's not accepted, but it's more because a lot of people just don't know the language, and they don't know at least in my teaching career, the way it has always worked out is that I've had to hide all of the cool, fun stuff my students do, because it looks like, that's very nice that you just sat on me, you silly
Oh my
cat.
goodness! I didn't know he was so big. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Keep talking.
Okay.
I'm gonna go.
A lot of what I've done over the years with any kind of technology, no matter what it is, and even the stuff I do now, I tend to keep it very, very quiet, because there's that perception, and perception for whatever it is usually 99% of the truth or law or whatever. There's a perception that people who use technologies to teach are arrogant, or that they're being show-offs, or they're doing whatever, and it really has nothing to do with that. It has to do with student learning. Some things work, some things don't, but I want to try everything and see what sticks. Some of our more traditional faculty are not willing to take those same risks.
That's very interesting. I've come across resistance, quite a bit of resistance, because of the unfamiliarity. That's very interesting. Any other thoughts on that? Okay.
My mic was off. I'm sorry. My mic was off.
Oh, go ahead.
This is not a monster. He's actually a tylosaur. It's a dinosaur that lived in the water. So that's why I want to wear him. But
okay.
I'm clipping into you. But I think the problem is, it's not just with the problem sometimes fundamentally is some people don't understand the importance of play. They don't understand anything that includes a sense of, I'm just going to play around with this and experiment. And I think, unfortunately, that's a pejorative term for some people, and
yes.
they don't understand. They don't understand fundamentally the importance of play. Because if you talk to academics, for example, who work in this area in the field of like game studies, right? Which is a real field. I know, because my wife is a professor, a tenured professor in game studies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they understand the value and the importance of play. It's not seen as like, well, this isn't serious. It's like, no, it actually is really serious. Play is a serious thing. It's about how your brain develops the ability to understand the world and make new connections and new inferences and categorize and organize new knowledge. Play is critical to that. And I think there's it's not just about the sex and people boinking in virtual worlds that freaks people out. I think fundamentally you dig a little deeper and they just don't understand play. They're like, well, it's a waste of time. They're just kind of, there's a guy on stage who looks like an aquatic dinosaur. That's so silly. And it's like, well, actually it really isn't. I mean, fundamentally it's an important part of how we learn. So the point I'm trying to make is the connection between play and education is so strong, and everyone here understands it. I'm preaching to the choir here, but not everyone gets that, and that's just the way it is, unfortunately, my experience.
Okay, and part of that might be that for some academic fields themselves, to gain in credibility and to gain a certain status it was a long haul for them over the last 100 years, and they had to do it in such a serious manner that to break with that might take probably not as much time, but it'll take some transitional time, I think, to understand now that you can be serious and not be serious if that makes any sense. You can be serious about your, one of my phrases is I'm very serious about my nonsense, but that doesn't mean that I'm not serious about doing it. Okay. Any other thoughts on this idea? Oh, hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I made a little growl there. Didn't mean to do that.
You did, girl. Okay, we have another question. This is from Dahlia. Do any of our presenters have any advanced sense or knowledge about Linden Lab's soon-to-be-released Sansar? And I know this was in yesterday's keynote speech about Sansar and how it may affect virtual worlds and best practices, or the possibility that it might be more education-friendly an environment than Second Life has been more recently. And I'm going to paste that into the chat because it's a little bit long. And I will just open this up for any of you to consider this and think about it.
I would ask right away, what do you mean by education friendly? What exactly is that?
That question was back to you, Dahlia. What do you mean by education friendly? Oh, we have a butterfly. Very nice.
Yeah, see, it's all about balance, right? So I was a big
right. And you're a different color, too.
It's not just about who you are, it's about who you were. And
yep.
So,
yep. And you're a different color, too, which is a very calming color now. Purple is a very calming and strengthening color. So that's good. Okay, and I'm just going to read this out quickly. Dahlia responds, early on in Second Life's business development, Linden Labs seemed to be more open to courting educational organizations than they were more recently. So I think that's in addition to that. More educational institutions in Second Life than in later years.
I think Cindy said something very, very, very key.
Okay, let me read that one out. Cindy, is this where it started with education in 3D?
Yeah.
Or did she say, was it before that? Okay, education in 3D will always be a challenge in open, unmoderated worlds. White labeling and rebranding for your institution is key.
Yeah, so I think Sansar will be a step forward in that area. It sounds like you can create closed worlds with Sansar. That I think could be very appealing to education. That's something that's very appealing for platforms like OpenSim, being able to have a closed environment that's just for your students, no other people in it. At the same time, I think it's a real tragedy when you lose the larger community where people can mix and rub up against each other. I think far too much currently we are designing technologies to keep us in silos and echo chambers and bubbles. If you look at if you spend time in Facebook, you know exactly what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
If you spend enough time in Facebook, it learns who you're talking to and what you're searching for and will give you more of the same, period. It won't serendipitously inject some new feed from somebody that you've never heard of or who's doing something you've never expressed an interest in terms of your search history.
Doesn't Google search do that also?
Google search also puts you in a bubble over time. Yeah, it's sad because I eventually I'm like I don't want to just see everything related to what I've been searching for. I want to see the stuff out in left field because that's
why you're searching, right?
Yeah, and I think it's more insidious in Facebook because Facebook is all about conversations and content and news, and the reason things like fake news can evolve and flourish is because the technology creates these echo chamber bubbles around you. And I think that's the challenge of, like, if you have a constellation of closed worlds, you don't have free movement between them. You don't have that serendipity happening. That, you know, sometimes sometimes it's rough. It's like, whoa, there's somebody wandered in here whose belief system is very different than mine, and they're dressed in a way that I've never seen anyone dressed like that. Maybe I'm even a little offended by it, but at the same time, that's how you have a rich community evolve over time, is this introduction of new ideas. I just hope in the future, you know, platforms like Sansar will still have the ability for people, if they want to move between different environments, maintaining a persistent identity. I think this is something that OpenSim got really, really right, where you have the hypergrid, where you can have closed worlds, but if the worlds want to open their borders a little bit, you can jump from one world to another and, you know, have a random person pop into your grid who is, you're running a grid, maybe like a Franco grid, which is focused on French-speaking people and a lot of artists, and maybe somebody wanders in from, you know, a grid that's focused on something completely off in left field, like, I don't know, Western world simulations or something like that. So,
yeah. Kevin or Desi, do you have anything to add to it?
Yeah, well, I think there's other aspects as well that are completely being missed by pretty much everybody across the board. And we were talking in the interview with Debbie yesterday. We started to get into a couple of them, but I sort of already knew where the conversation was going to go. Excuse me. A lot of the reasons why these environments are not as organization friendly as they could be is because the tools are just simply not there in order to sort of the administration and overhead that needs to go into environments like this. So let me give you an example. So here it is. We've got the VWBPE campus, or you've got the Rockcliffe campus, or whatever campus, right? I mean, everybody that's been building probably has run into this at some point along the line. There's nothing in this environment. There's very little in Open Simulator and in other environments similar to that, where you can work collaboratively on a build and then be able to have any reasonable expectation of being able to do anything with that after it's done, right? So you might have gotten the prim from one source, you might have gotten the mesh from somewhere else, you might have gotten a texture from somewhere else. Because they all have different ownership properties to them, you can't do anything with it other than inside this little walled garden that we have here. The real world doesn't work that way, right? I mean, you go into business, you go into education, you go into IT, you go into software development. It's the collaborative work of multiple people that are working on a single product. And the value of that product is the ability to be able to export it, to be able to package it, to be able to share it, right? Whether it's for free or whether it's for profit, doesn't. Right? But it's everything about these environments make it very difficult to do that. So I mean, there's one example just on the content creation side. Another example is where, again, let's take the conference here as an example. We put the registration page up so that people can get receipts for their institutions, right? But if we wanted to put, and as I'm about to give this example, I realize I don't want to suggest something that we're not going to be doing. If we decide to do a different type of conference down the line where we decide to sell tickets for that particular conference, there are no tools available that we can automatically upload a listing of people to say these people have access to these particular environments, they have access to these regions or parcels, they have access to the following groups, right? You just simply cannot do that in these particular environments because the tools are not there in order to do user management. Right. So if you want to bring a classroom of 30 students into the environment and you want to pre-set up 30 avatars, you have to sit down one at a time and you have to register each one individually. You can't just come in here and say, here's a list. Boom. By the way, right, here's the gender, the avatar that I want you to set up. Here's the group that I want them to be in, right? All of that stuff should be automated. There's no reason why it can't be automated, right? It's just data. That's all it is.
So you'd have a selection of avatars, and you just click on one and say, okay, this avatar, this gender.
Well, not even select. I mean, I want to upload a spreadsheet. Here's my class list. Boom.
Oh,
right? Create 30 avatars for me, right? There's no reason why you can't do something like that. I mean, it would probably take a programmer all of like 3 days to set something like that up. But over the last 14 years, nobody at Second Life has ever done something like that. Now, I'm quite sure that there's things in the back end, right, in Linden Labs themselves where they can do things like that. But they've never made those particular tools available to anybody else, right?
And I want to add, if I could just jump in, that, when Philip Rosedale was CEO and Pathfinder and Claudia Linden were involved, there was a lot of advocacy for the education world. When Philip was replaced and Path left and then Claudia left, there was really very few people advocating for educators, and we were going to be treated absolutely equal to every other group. But the thing that they didn't consider is that we had hard money because we wrote grants, we got grants to pay for this land, and we had money where other groups may not have had money, and it created a really bad. It wasn't good. It was a bad time because we had a hard enough time legitimizing using the environment in teaching. Now we have to fight with the people who have the environment to legitimize our teaching with it, because they didn't want to, treat us any more special than anybody else. I think that was M when M was here. Then the next person came in and came back and said, oh, sorry, whoopsie daisy, here's your educator funding back. But they lost so many people. And the inability or the unwillingness to create the tools that Feenan's talking about that really, other environments do them. What is the holdup? What is the issue? You're never going to get Harvard back here. You're never going to get Stanford back here. Princeton's not coming. Oxford's not coming. You've lost them. So now people are looking at, space, OpenSim, they're looking at other stuff. And that is because Linden Lab lost vision of what was really captivating to educators and didn't pay attention to the community that they were supposed to serve. Well, so that's my little soapbox. I'm sorry, but I feel so strongly that educators got screwed over so bad because I went to bat with our board of trustees trying to establish legitimacy for this place, and then your new CEO didn't think I was legitimate either. What am I doing? Like, why am I trying to get money for you if you don't think I'm worth it? So just a little passionate soapbox. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I mean, there's clearly a divide around 2009, thereabouts, where it's become painfully obvious that between the lawyers and the bean counters that they essentially took over the shop, because I think there was a huge emphasis on saying, we could potentially take this and we can go out to the Fortune 500 companies and we're ready to market this in front of those particular groups. And, there's lots of money with Fortune 500s. And unfortunately, almost everything that they touched at that particular point in time just completely missed the mark of their demographics on all fronts. I mean, myself being in the IT industry, I work with Fortune 500s, I work with governments, I work with telecommunication firms, and I know exactly, when we're talking about data centers, right? When you're talking about trying to bring a technology into a data center as a professional tool, and then you say, by the way, you're going to have to open up every port on your firewall, and we're going to charge you $60,000 a year, and you have no control over the hardware. It's sort of like, every single IT, every CIO is basically going to take that particular product and they're going to draw a great big X through it because it's too much of a risk. Doesn't matter how good the software was. The marketing behind it, the way they were treating the whole Nebraska project at that particular point in time was just completely off. And unfortunately, they brought that mindset across everything that they were doing, right? The lawyers get in here and they're basically saying, oh, we can't have mentors because they potentially could misrepresent the company and we could be sued, right? So what's the reaction? Well, let's get rid of all the mentors. Well, duh, who's bringing in who's telling all their friends to come into Second Life, right? You've got the educators, you've got the people that are doing mentors, you've got the people that are actively using the product because they have an emotional tie to what's going on. I mean, this is why Apple's so successful. It's not because Apple's products are any better than anybody else's. It's because there's an emotional connection between the product, the brand, and the customer base.
Mm-hmm.
And Linden Lab had all of it at their doorstep. And they
Amen.
systematically
Amen.
destroyed it one piece at a time over the course
Amen.
of 18 months. Right?
No offense to you, Path, because you were Pathway, and I want to make sure that everybody understand this. Pathfinder and Claudia were like our champions, and anything that we could ever get done, we got done because Pathfinder and Claudia helped us. And then when they left, I mean, when I think I cried when you left Linden Lab. I cried because the first thing that happened when they came in, the new administration came in. I had islands because the Dante's Inferno build is huge, but it isn't a lot of prim. It's just big, and it required a full sim. And that's when homesteads were coming out. And Philip had given me some land to put it on. And the very first thing that they did was come to me and say, oh, there's not going to be that anymore. We're not going to have it. And Literature Alive was built so that it wouldn't be tied to a university, to my employer, because it's an open source, what we now call OER, Open Educational Resource. Everything that's made for those, now there are 74 builds. For those 74 builds is made available for free to the community. At the time was Teen Grid and the Adult Grid. Now it's the Adult Grid. And everything is made to be shared and distributed. But I pay for it entirely myself. I take absolutely no money for it. So Philip understood that through the SLVU's program. I told him that's the vision for Literature Live, to keep it in the public domain. And when they came in and they did that, it was just like this huge slap in the face. And I have been such a benefactor of all the universities that have allowed land grants for Literature Alive over the years. But had it not been for them, that would have tanked me, because I had nowhere to put any of the builds, when they took away these little parcels of land that they had let me use. There were no advocates for educators after Path and Claudia were let go. I mean, I don't know that you were let go. I think Claudia was definitely let go. Path, I don't know if you left on your own.
My job ceased to exist.
That was the same for Claudia, right?
I've been very public about that. Yeah.
And you were amazing. And thank you for everything that you did for us back then. I know I told you then, and you probably don't remember, but thank you for everything, for those medical sims. Remember the medical sims that were around that were teaching people about depression and about they were phenomenal, and now they're not here, and because we lost our voice.
Well, first of all, that you're very kind, and the feeling is very mutual in terms of just how special this community is to me. I don't have adequate words to talk about how important this is to me, and still is. The thing to remember too is that companies are conversations, and those conversations can change on a dime based on who's in the company, and all of a sudden the desire was no verticals. That's really what it was. And the sad thing to me is that, when people talk about verticals, and I, as Ebby said when his keynote was being broadcast from a secret location somewhere, I won't go into that and have the audience response here when I was sitting here and everyone else was sitting here watching YouTube. But, he talked about how, we don't, vertical, he said something about how, vertical is about like, well, we're not trying to get these people in here, or we don't want to put our, we don't have resources to dedicate to getting people in. Supporting a vertical isn't just about getting them in. It's about helping them succeed once they're in. That's the big disconnect that I often just see, not just at, companies like what Linden Lab was, because I really have very little insight into what the company is like now, because it's been 7 years since I left. But it's about helping the customers in a particular vertical succeed, and the reason is like, well, why do you want them to succeed? Well, not just to make money, but because you want the innovators of your platform to succeed, and the people who have the long ripple effects And for an environment like a user-generated content virtual world space like this, there are two. There's three. There's the educators, the people working with people with disabilities, because that's an insanely powerful use case, and those people are already here because this gives them affordances they don't have in the physical world. So you want to target the verticals of the education market. You want to target the vertical of the supporting people with different types of disabilities, healthcare issues market. And the third one is artists. Because artists are always the ones who are going to take a brand new tool and say, you know what, I'm going to use this paintbrush to flick paint on the canvas instead of painting the way the designers of the paintbrush designed it to be used. And all of a sudden you've got, artists like Pollock and so forth doing amazing things with the platform of the paintbrush and the canvas. And when you support those verticals, not only do you make money, but you see totally new use cases for your technology that allow you to tweak it over time to allow even more amazing things to be done. Because at the end of the day, if you have to explain why your platform is amazing, then you've failed. What you need to be able to do is the Buddhist
so
thing.
true.
You need to be able to hold the lotus flower out and say, thus, here's the flower. Here's the amazing thing that was done with the platform. And then people look at that and they remember the thus. They remember the flower. They don't remember you getting up there and saying, this is a great platform that's going to be like this, but fantastic, and going to do all these fantastic things. That's why there's a lot of trouble in VR right now, because there is no thus yet. There are a few amazing experiences in VR that are really cool, but there's no here's the amazing story, the customer story, the use case story that is actually happening. Not just we imagine someone using it this way, but actually people are using it this way right now. And
I think, like Feenan was saying before,
my soapbox now.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, so like Feenan was saying before, like Linden Lab has had opportunity after opportunity with this community to do the right thing, and every single time they failed. So it's really hard to even say to myself, well, I'll give them another chance, because we gave them tons of chances over the past 10 years. And Sansart, from what I've read, which is why I don't know much about it, it just seems like more of the same, just a different engine. I would rather throw my beans at some startup who's really trying to break ground and do something different, who wants different communities and different voices to come in, because I'm not going to be able to convince anybody to put money into Second Life. And in the academic world that I live in, I have to use legitimate tools and products, and Linden Lab just didn't value the precious lotus flower they had in the educators.
Yeah. Well,
they just didn't value us.
Yeah, I think there's two responses to that I just sort of want to throw in here. One is there has absolutely been a dramatic change in attitude on the part of Linden Lab. I mean, Linden Lab is the place that we love to hate and love to love type of thing. Ebby has certainly been bringing, I think, a far more realistic approach to, it's not where it was, which I would love it to be. I'd love to see the verticals back in place. But, the fact that he's engaging, the fact that he's actually talking to stakeholder groups, the fact that they're actually listening to their community base, before Ebby, it was a long time since they had done that. And I think they've fully understood exactly the mistakes that they've made. And while the idea of bringing back the verticals, maybe that's not quite appealing to them at this particular point in time, at least they're willing to have the open conversation, right? And I think that's huge in terms of their viability into the future. In terms of Sansar as a product, though, I don't know. I mean, I've sort of got mixed reactions to it, because I mean, right at the moment, we could, there's obviously the stuff happening with Open Simulator, the stuff happening with space. There's a couple of other interesting things coming along. Philips obviously got its high fidelity product that is, still a bit of a kludge, but it's getting better each time I go in there. So I don't know. I mean, I think for myself, I'm willing to give Sansar a chance because it looks like there's some interesting things that could be coming out of there. But I agree with you. I mean, it's um, the road back, trying to overcome. Educators have a very long memory, and especially the people that pay for the grants and everything else have a long memory. And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done before that negative impression is really going to be able to be overcome fully.
So as the president of Rockcliffe, would you be able to build in Sansar yourself? Or is this something that someone would have to build for you? I guess that's the part about Sansar that is still fuzzy to me.
Well, we've been asking to get in there, and we haven't been given permission to go in there yet. I guess we're going to get in there with everybody else. But so the way Abby's been positioning it is twofold. One is that it's not going to be like Second Life where you've got this huge grid, right? You're essentially going to go in and you're going to buy what he's calling a scene, which is essentially a simulator, right? And then you upload all your content. It doesn't sound as if there's going to be any actual building tools in that environment. And unfortunately, the primary build that you're going to be allowed to the primary objects that, I apologize, I don't know why I'm stumbling over words right at the moment. Maya 3D Max, these are the two products that they're primarily focusing on in order to get mesh objects from your desktop into the virtual environment. So you essentially build your scenes outside of the virtual environment, which is good on one hand because you've got full control over all of your stuff, right? But on the other hand, obviously, it sounds as if there's no building tools inside that environment. The other problem is that I was just looking at Maya 3D Max yesterday, as a matter of fact, and if it weren't for the fact that there's an educational pricing which is free through your through your educational institution, they want close to $2,000 per year in order to have access to 3D Max. Now, the average user, and that's per seat, right? That's not here it is and you can install it on 20 computers. This is per seat. So, right there, they have now automatically priced probably 75% out of being able to develop their own content for Sansar. That the intention is going to be, the focus is really going to be on purchasing products that have already been pre-developed for you, right? So I don't know. I mean, this is why I've got mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, I think Sansar will give us a little bit more control. I think the pricing model, Ebby's talking $10, $20 per region per month, which is now down around the same price as Open Simulator, which is great, right? But if you have to purchase all your stuff outside, if you can't really bring stuff in, if the average person cannot bring stuff into the environment short of buying it, then I don't know. I mean, it's just
right.
I want to take a wait. I want to take a wait and see approach. I know with inside Rockcliffe, I mean, we're like right at the moment we've got our environment here in Second Life. We've got our virtual library campus over at Avacon Grid. We've got some stuff on Kitely. We've got stuff in Minecraft, World of Warcraft, Sansar. We've purchased a domain space within High Fidelity. I mean, we're the whole point of Rockcliffe is that we have access to these environments and we can play with them as sandboxes, right?
Right.
Sansar is for us is going to be another sandbox. Now, whether it extends from that so that we can maybe move our campus from Second Life to Sansar, I can't say. I don't know. Right? Right now, Second Life still appears to be the better product, but there's a lot of things that Ebby had said yesterday that are very encouraging about what you could potentially do. let me give you an example, and this is something that I've been talking about for our library system for years, close to 10 years now. One of the things that I want to do with our library system by the time we've finally got it all built and and all the various components involved with it is I want to be able to package it so that I can give people their own individual copy of our library system. So that if you want to do a collaborative work project with 6 or 7 other avatars, that you can do that. You can just simply put down your own copy of the library, add stuff to it, remove stuff from it, right? But you can work with it going forward, right? Including all of the resources that we have that sort of support what's there. I can't do that in Second Life. I could do it in Kitely. In Open Simulator, it's a little bit more difficult. Now, if I build it in Unity, I could certainly do it in Unity, right? But Unity is, from all I understand, is going to be similar to Sansar, except Sansar's got the infrastructure built in behind it a little bit more. So I don't know. Maybe Sansar might have some really interesting things, such that we could build out our library with more doodads attached to it, and then we could sort of provide it as a quote-unquote scene that other people can then use to duplicate and have access to all of the archives and everything else that we have available through Rockcliffe for them to use. Right? I think that's extremely powerful to do something like that. Will Sansar allow us to do that? I don't know. It sounds like it might, but God only knows what's going to happen, and nobody's going to know, I think, until they actually release it.
I have to say, just the big unknown for me. Well, it's funny how much people talk about the stuff in the environment. Can we put our stuff in there? Can we build it? How do we build stuff? How do we move stuff? How do I make stuff do stuff? How do I make stuff do things? But the big unknown around, and the most important thing, in my opinion, and the big unknown around Sansar is, well, how do people interact? Do you have do you have things like groups? Do you have the ability to help people maintain a persistence identity and a chat history and maintain social connections by having friends lists, not just friends lists, but but things like private chat, group chat? Do you have infrastructure for people to be able to create the scaffolding needed to support people talking with each other and building long-term communities that grow over time?
Stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's the people. It's like talking about how we're going to be able to build these houses and put these furniture here, and no one's talking about, like, well, are there going to be phones? Is there going to be a way for, like, roads for people to be able to kind of like drive and send email to each other? What's a big unknown for me around Sansar is how much is it going to support community building, which at the end of the day, it's not just about the stuff, although the stuff plays a big part, but it's about the community building. And I'll say one thing again about OpenSim. When things in OpenSim started working, like being able to have friends on different grids and being able to have groups where you have group chat across multiple grids, when that whole multi-grid friends and groups and communication started to take off in OpenSim, coupled with the hypergrid ability to have people appear for events, and there are people at an event and there are 10 avatars and each of them is from a completely different grid, that created another level of excitement and interest and community building capabilities in OpenSim. And it was amazing to see that happen. So I hope something like that is planned for Sansar. But
yes. Okay. We have gone a bit over time, and we are officially at the end of our panel discussion. And for those of you who have another event or activity to go to, thank you for joining us for our Legacy panel. I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining